Nowadays, everybody just drives across this country, especially these Appalachians, and across the whole country, not realizing what's in between these big cities, all the country, and all the people that lived in this country. They haven't got a clue. Places just like this, so beautiful, farmland, wilderness, so beautiful. But most never get to see this and don't understand it. And it's so much history just passed through these hills. Our beautiful farmland. You get to see stuff like this and all the modern equipment that works these farms. But a lot of people will tell you, well, what do we need farms for? We just go down to the grocery store and get anything we want. Bread, milk, meat. No problem at all. Might be a little expensive, but it's no problem to get anything you need. And people take it for granted to get this stuff off the grocery shelf. But it didn't used to be that way. And they don't understand the clean running water in your home, your indoor toilets. But I'm going to share with you how it used to be in these mountains and across this rural America. How they done things, how they done without, and how they live. Now here's a map of the United States and all the major cities in each state. You can see there's a lot of them. But there's a lot of country in between them too. Here's a map of the population centers where most of the population is in the U.S. The high points. You can see there's a lot of country in between these population centers. And right here is the Appalachian. You can see how low it is there, how the big population centers ain't in these mountains. But there's a lot of small cities in them, but there's still a lot of country. Now these old people come in here, in this country, trying to find their own land, trying to make a living, raise their own family the way they see fit, and worship the way they see fit. And they struggled. But here I have to pay homage to the Native Americans. This is a map of all the great tribes that was in this country for thousands of years before we became a nation. And you can see the country here. It's just wild. A lot of it's just wild wilderness. These mountains and tough places to do anything in. But they came in here. They came in here trying to find their own way. And yes, the Native Americans didn't want them in here. That's for sure. But a lot of them lived with them and intermixed with them. And they first built places like this, little forts, little cabins to protect themselves. Just simple log cabins, built like this. This is the way they done things. And they put them together like this, simple techniques, notched them. This is how they put them together here, the old log cabins. But as time went on, where they made and worked the wood, this is how they interlocked the old wood structures with tools like this. No power tools, all by hand. By hand. These are the tools they used. Here's what each tool was used for and what it's called. Hard labor, but they done it. And later on the sawmills started coming in, made it a little bit easier where they cut them up into rough board, rough lumber. But that was before. This is before that. They started out with little homes like this around these mountains. Little simple homes, all made by hand. All kinds of little structures. Beautiful old homes, all made by hand, every piece of it. The chimneys, shingles, old homes like this even, old taverns along these roadways. And they had fireplaces like this in them back in the time. The kitchen was around the fireplace. This is where they cooked at. Old fireplaces like this, well used, and kept the house warm too. And old beds like this, downstairs, upstairs, this is what they look like. The old furniture, they handmade all this. And their springs, where they got their water, just an old spring house out of the ridge back behind the house. And later on, some of them had hand pumps in the house. But here's an old corn crib out back. Simple handmade structures. And old barns like this at first. Just old log barns. They served their purpose. I'll show it to you here. Little pens where they kept their animals. How they hewed the logs out. Probably kept a mule in one. An old milk cow in another one. This is what they look like. Beautiful old structures. And here's the roofs on them. Handmade shapes, they call them. And they didn't have no indoor plumbing. This was their outhouse. This is the bathroom of the day for a long time in these mountains, and still is in some places. But as time went on, they moved up to the more modern houses, old farmhouses, but still a lot of them didn't have no electricity, no indoor plumbing. But this is the old farmhouse today. The old barns too, they moved up. They're all just slowly going away. The old wooden barn. Yes, they had a lot of livestock too. Cattle, horses, sheep, goats, they had it all. But their primary staple was corn. And they growed a lot of corn. Not this hybrid stuff. And they growed a lot of it too. And it took a lot of work back in them days to work these big fields. So they had big families. That's why they had big families on these farms. This was help. This is for the family. They all worked together as a team. And then their kids growed up and had kids and so on. And that kept the farm going for many a generation. Even before the old combustible tractor here. This is an old one. Way back before that time. The old combustible engine. This is the workhorse tractor of the day. An old team of mules or horses. They worked these hard. And ain't nothing better than an old guy knowed his mules and his mules knowed him. They worked together as a team all the time. Day in and day out on these farms. They even used old oxen. I call that low bulldog there, old oxen. But they were powerful animals, and they used them a lot. But they used a lot of horses too, big teams of horses on these big farms. Plow all day with them. And then little smaller farms. You imagine how much work this is. Look how long that field is. That's a long job right there. And out west, to pull these big cultivators, look at the horses, teams of horses it took to pull them. Man, just imagine all the hardware. But here's what they use today. That replaced all that. But this is way back before this here. But most of them were just a common, simple man. A little farm on his little piece of land, trying to scratch out a living for a garden for his family. And then even back before the time of this is an old picture of the old square bales. They're not square anymore. They're round. But this is how they used to do it right here. Old team of horses, an old cultivator. And get their hay in, it's all by hand. And here's some of the old machinery that I've seen sitting around in these old farms. The old cutting machines, the old rakes, time's gone by. These old cutting machines, how many times they've cut these big fields. Just rusting away, museum pieces. These old people, they worked hard. They worked hard trying to make a living in these mountains. And one thing for sure, you growed up in these mountains, you learned the outdoors real quick as a small child. From your elders, they taught you everything. And you especially learned to hunt. And you learned to hunt on your own, because this was a way of making a living when you didn't have nothing else. You could put meat on the table. So you learned this at a real early age. From your dad, your grandparents, they taught you all you know. And this right here, the old gray squirrel, that put many a food on the table when you didn't have nothing else. This fed many a kid, many a family right here, and still does today. And these animals, they didn't mistreat none of these animals. They lived on it. I can remember my grandmother making coon stew all the time. But unfortunately, you see more killed on the road than you do in the woods anymore. It's not like that anymore. Back then, nothing went to waste. When they eat the meat and they sold the pelts, they was big money back in them days. You can put shoes on some kids' feet by selling these pelts. But most of the time on these farms, you had your own livestock. You growed your own bacon, your own hogs. That was a pride. And every time it come frost season, what you didn't sell or trade, you butchered them. You butchered your own hogs around frost season. And you didn't have freezers back in them days. You had a smokehouse. You'd put them in a smokehouse and cure. Seemed like the meat tastes better too. And every little old farm had a whole bunch of chickens. Always chickens running around. But the pride of these chickens was the eggs. And these eggs were big trading commodities down at the country store. So they was like gold. But still, it wasn't nothing. Every once in a while, Grandma would go out there and kill a chicken for Sunday dinner. I've seen it many a time. But mostly they raised a garden every year. The family did. They would trade with some of the stuff. But usually they'd all get together and share the bounty. If They worked the garden all summer long. And I mean, they prepped and canned everything. Late summer, kept you busy canning, prepping, getting everything ready to can. And I mean, they canned everything. They didn't go hungry. They planned it this way. I mean, they canned anything that could be canned, what they could get their hands on, what they growed, or what they could trade for, they canned it. And they milked their own cows in the morning, in the evening. A lot of milk come off these farms. You don't see that anymore either. Made their own butter. Made some good cow butter, I'm telling you. Best tasting. And they take their old corn here, what they kept, what they didn't trade or sell, and they would shuck it themselves there when it dried out, and they'd take it down to the mill. Every community had a little old water mill down here. Here's one running right here. An old water wheel, run by water. They dropped the corn down in it up top. Here's one working. It would fall down through there in between the grindstone. It would pulverize that corn in the cornmeal. And I'm telling you, there ain't nothing better than tasting fresh ground cornmeal for cornbread. I mean, it's just so good tasting. And here's how an old grist mill works. Just a cutaway view here that I drawed. How it actually works. The old water wheels. Time's gone by. And what'd they cook on? Well, they cooked on these little old cast iron stoves that run off coal or wood. Of all different sorts and all different makes. And that's the best tasting food, seems like. And here's some pictures of different stoves of the time, what they sold. And man, it just seems like the food tastes so much better on an old coal or wood stove. Good tasting food. And how did you fire these things up? Manual labor. You split your own wood with tools like this for kindling. And even anybody can cut wood. It's just a technique of how you split it. But I've seen my grandmother use an axe many a time. And on these old farms, this is the money crop, tobacco. This paid the taxes every year. This put clothes on the kids' backs, shoes on their feet. This got them ahead every year. But it was a lot of labor. But this is the way it was. And every old farm, never ending stuff to be done on these farms. Never ends. Day in, day out. And everybody had their own chores to do. It didn't matter how old you was either. You started at an early age, learning how to take care of things, your part of the chores. And here's the washing machine in the bathtub of the day. An old number 10 wash tub. And it was all hand washing before electricity, before they had a washing machine. And these women worked these scrub boards. I know their fingers was blistered, raw, bless their hearts. And the little girls of the house, they growed up fast. They could wash clothes, iron clothes, hang clothes. They learned at an early age. And many of a kid packed water up to the house. All their time growing up. Didn't have indoor house water. But here's the drawing of what kind of water they had. at them days before electricity. Of course, they didn't have a pump. There was no electricity. They had a cistern, sprang, or carried it up from a river or a well. That's the way it was. Yeah, and every little community had a little old country store back then. What you couldn't grow or make yourself, you'd have to do a little trading down there to get things you just couldn't make. And they were usually good people, part of the community. Everybody knowed each other. And you'd usually run up a tab you would pay off every once in a while. Now these people, they struggled. Some struggled more than others, but they made it. They worked as a team and they took care of each other. And they could make their own furniture, and real craftsmen about it too. Some people were really skilled and gifted. They would make this stuff for themselves or their family, but a lot of it they would sell it and make some money for a living. Make their own lye soap, even trade with that down at the store. So they was real resilient. Made their own brooms, own utensils. They could do about anything. Even make their own material after they spin it. The wool and stuff, they'd make their own clothes, these machines. And they were good at it too. And these are some of the best quilt makers in the world. These southern women. Guarantee you. And they made their own shoes. Somebody in the community was good at it. Make or repair shoes all the time. And metalwork, they could make about anything, blacksmithing, any kind of metalwork, fabrication, they would make it themselves. And yes, they made their own drinking whiskey too. And they pride themselves on it in these mountains. Some were better than others. But Lord, they've been making it since they come in these mountains. And that'll never stop. And they could make their own. There wasn't no Lowe's to go to or Home Depot in them days. You made your own roof shakes for shingles. You made your own furniture, repaired your own furniture. And like I said, some of them are really gifted making some of this furniture. Such beautiful works too. And back in them days, there wasn't no doctor to go to. There wasn't no doctor to call, come and see you. You were just on your own. And that was the sad part about these mountains. And many a mom worried herself to death over her babies being sick. Don't know what's wrong with them. You tried your best to do your best for them, but sometimes it just don't work. And there's been many a little old graveyards I've been to, and I see stuff like this. It saddens me so bad. So bad. And so many families back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, died from typhoid fever. Come into these mountains, and it spread like wildfire. So sad. And it's sad you see your elders getting old and dying, nothing you can do for them, so you care for them the best you can. That's the way it was. That's the way it still is. And you took care of your own. The community would come together and bury somebody. A lot of our people, the pioneers that come in here, we don't even know who they are. No register. Just a rock. And lucky to find that. So many are even unmarked. But these mountain people, especially these mountain women, some of them had a skill of all the herbs in these mountains. what could cure this, what could cure that, what could help this. But they were limited, but they helped a lot of people. And one of the herbs is old ginseng. It's plentiful in these mountains. And here's what it looks like. But it's over-harvested. And it needs to be protected. These people worked these farms, even with their kids with them. The whole family worked this corn. Had to be hoed. Had to be hoed. And back then, there wasn't no television, no cell phone, no computer, not even a telephone or no electricity for a long time. This was the social media of the day, a mailbox. And yes, they made their own entertainment too. They made their own instruments. They made their own music. Some of the best music come out of these southern Appalachian mountains. They could play. And a lot of them went far. Some of them didn't. But there's some great music in these mountains. Always have been. Come Sundays, everybody quit work. And everybody went to church in the communities. After church, they would help decorate the grave, especially on Decoration Day. And on a Sunday afternoon, always a baptizing going somewhere at one of these little churches. A lot of people attend them. Many people baptized in these little creeks through these communities. Many of people. And you'd have these family picnics and church outings on Sunday afternoon. Such wonderful times to remember. And family was everything. That's what you lived for. You took care of your elders, they took care of you, and you done it generation after generation. And sadly, our old people are leaving us one by one, and they're leaving us more and more quickly every day. So I hope you enjoy this. There's so many things to touch on. So I hope you enjoyed this little How It Used to Be segment of the Appalachians. So God bless, take care, and I'll see you next time.